Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm in Sonoma County with Erica Stancliff of Trombetta Family Wines. Erica, welcome. Thanks for joining us, and tell us a little bit about Trombetta.
So Trombetta is actually my mother's maiden name. That is where we came up with the name for our winery. My mother is a longtime Sonoma County resident. I was born and raised here. And my mother and I started the label in 2010 after I graduated with my degree in enology. Paul Hobbs is a longtime family friend, and he was kind of the pushing factor into getting us into the commercial business side of things. My parents had been home winemakers for over 30 years, never thought they wanted to go commercial. My dad is an engineer by trade. He's worked for Hewlett-Packard and now the spin-off company from Hewlett-Packard called Keysight. So he was always, wine was a passion and a hobby, but never the full-time day job kind of situation. So when my family started this label, it was kind of with the guidance of Paul Hobbs and with the idea that one day I would come on board as winemaker, which in 2014, after working in numerous places, kind of all over the world, I then came back and took over as winemaker.
And so where are you located? And do you own vineyards, or are you purchasing fruit, or a combination?
So it's kind of a combination actually now, which is really exciting. My parents have a very small property in Forceville, and like I said, they were home winemakers, so my dad had 220 vines planted on the property of Pinot and Chardonnay, and this year, for the first time, we actually harvested that, and we're making a Rosa from the estate fruit, which is really exciting because my dad gets to have, Stancliff family vineyards on a wine now, but primarily we've been sourcing, and part of that is because when we started in 2010, as everyone knows, the economy and the recession, property was so expensive and still is in Sonoma County, and being that we had never been farmers by trade more than just what we did at our own homes, we didn't have any property. So we started with Gap's Crown Pinot Noir, which is located in the Petaluma Gap. But then as we started to branch out and grow, which we've done slowly over the last few years, we sourced from a lot of really good family friends who have been farmers, who have small vineyards that are very focused in different AVAs in this county. And in 2016, I took over as winemaker for another facility in Sebastopol called Furthermore Wines. And so I make the Trombetta at that location since I am in charge of the property and the winery. It just makes it really easy to have everything under one roof. So because we're around 1,000 cases, we're pretty much using space at the Furthermore location, sourcing fruit now with one estate vineyard, and we're just small and happy little family winery, basically.
And what are the varieties that you're producing?
Pinot Noir and Chardonnay mainly, and then the Rosé will be of Pinot Noir as well.
And are you direct to consumer, or can your wines be found in various markets?
So we are primarily direct to consumer, but we are located in specific markets. Like we're on the East Coast, for example. We're in Texas, and we have it listed on our website where we are in specific markets. Obviously, because we are so small, we're not in all 50 states, but we definitely want to be in really great, food and restaurant hubs across the country.
So tell me, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Oh boy. So, so when my parents actually met up at Hewlett-Packard on the Fountain Grove location over 36 years ago. And when they did, there was a engineer up there called Carmine Indindoli, and he brought all these engineers to his house because he lives right in the heart of Russian River. He lives right off of Laguna, kind of by Martin Ray and Joseph Swan and everyone. And he had a home vineyard and little winery. So he taught all these engineers how to become home winemakers in the 80s. So that's where my parents had the kind of ignited the passion on the winemaking side. And my first memories are really just being at Carmine's house on the weekends with my parents, sitting there with the horde of children, that were dragged out with their parents on the deck, on the deck swing, as my parents are harvesting grapes, and the kids are running around being told not to run it by the glass and don't touch the Felcos because you might cut your hand off. So that's kind of my earliest memory, is just being around the vineyards and the home winemaking crew.
Oh, that's great. What a great memory. So what's the first or most memorable wine you've ever drunk, and what was the occasion?
So it's actually the wine that made me had my aha moment. And as to that, I really did enjoy wine. When my mom started going into the industry, she worked for Paul Hobbs in the late 90s through early 2000s. And Paul kind of became a fixture in our lives. He's kind of the unofficial uncle, really, in the family. We adopted him because back at the time he was just starting his brand and he was single and living up here by himself. And so he would come over for dinner quite frequently. I was in middle school, and because my dad was a home winemaker, I was always used to getting glasses of wine shoved in my face and being asked, what does this smell like? Because I was very sensitive aromatically and with mouthfeel. And so Paul came over for dinner one night, poured a glass of wine, and told me to try it. So my first instinct is, well, what's wrong with it then? And he just kind of looked at me, he's like, nothing's wrong with it, try the wine. And it was a 1997 Michael Black Merlot from Napa Valley, the Coombsville AVA, before it was Coombsville. And that was the wine that just kind of, it hit it for me, because it was this beautiful, you know, you think of Merlot and there's so many different variations of the way it can be made. And this one was made in a very Bordeaux style. So it was structured, it had tannin. I mean, I can still remember this wine really well. And it became my favorite wine. So every time it was Christmas or a holiday or something came up, Paul would give me a bottle until I depleted his stores, because he stopped making it in 2001, I believe. And so now I have like 2 magnums at the house that we're not touching until I get married or something amazing happens. You know what I mean?
Traveling the world abroad, what would you say the best foreign wine is that you've ever drunk?
Ooh, that's a tough one, because I will give you 2. There's my favorite go-to that just any day, anytime I can have champagne. Like I love champagne. I am a champagne bubbles girl, hands down, all the time. I will say the next best that I feel like is finally starting to get the notoriety is, I worked in Argentina. I worked at Viña Cobos, and there's something so amazing about the Malbec down there. But also on top of it is the Cabernet Sauvignon and the Cab Franc down there, the Bordeaux varietals. And I feel like the rustic approach they have to Bordeaux style winemaking, but at the same time being true to the Argentine roots, and especially in Mendoza, right there on the Andes Mountains, that cool climate and that wind that comes in. I mean, that has a special place in my heart. And I feel like it's a little underrated, but it's absolutely amazing.
Among all the populations of the world, who do you think drinks the best in terms of quality?
You know, as far as drinking the best, that's kind of hard, because, you know, you have the French, you go to Burgundy, and it's like, well, they're all drinking amazing wine. Even if it's the village wine, it's going to be better than what 90% of the people in the U.S. are drinking. But at the same time, you go to Italy and, you know, you could be in the heart of Tuscany, you could be in Marche, you could be in Milan, wherever, and they're going to have amazing wine, just as, you know, that's absolutely fabulous, that people aren't used to seeing here, or that just they're raised with it also. So it's a completely different lifestyle in Europe. So it's kind of I would almost say any old world country in Europe probably drinks better than as far as the population, just because they have more of it. They have so many different variations of different varietals and different styles and everything else, that no matter where you are in that country, you're going to find something that you're going to want to drink.
So based on what you were saying, I can guess a few of the wines that you have in your cellar. But what would you say the most expensive wine is that's in there?
Okay, that's really hard, because if we go... So as far as my cellar is concerned, my whopping like 150, bottle wine fridge, exactly. My parents have the amazing collection, but I would say for myself, at least my most prized ones would be, I have some Telegraph Hill. I love Chateauneuf du Pape. Just GSM blends are amazing. So I have some of that. And then I actually also have now obviously I cannot afford DRC, as most normal human beings cannot. But I have, when we went to Burgundy about 2 years ago, we went to Bouchard-Périfie and I bought some of their Vaucenet Romanée. So I have that sitting in my cellar. And while it's not exactly the most expensive bottle I have, it's definitely a special one that I'm saving for a special occasion. But yeah, my French wine is probably the most expensive that I have in my personal cellar. At my parents' house, I would say the 3 most expensive wines we have are some vintage Paul Hobbs, Beckstoffer, Toquelin, Dr. Crane, of course, especially in the Magnum size. That's car down payment, basically. And then also my dad because he hoards things, he hides them so that he doesn't drink them himself. And I was going through, we call it Big Bertha. It's a 500 wine bottle, double door, wine fridge. And I was going through Bertha a few months ago for when we have friends over who enjoy wine. I try to go in there and pull out the good stuff that they never drink because they save it for special occasions. And he had a Magnum of 1981 Ridge. Wow. Sitting in there. And I was just like, all right, we are definitely saving that for an amazing, that one's probably one of his most prized and more expensive ones that we have in our home collection.
Ooh, some good wines to drink in the future.
Exactly.
So do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Not really. And my reasoning behind that is the amazing thing about wine is it's just like food. It's very fluid. There is no set, rigid, specific parameters on a way you have to make something. Some people will make Riesling to be really dry. Some will make it really sweet. Some will make Pinot to be lighter, more acid forward. Some make it a little more heavy bodied, richer and darker textured. Some make it higher alcoholic, a little sweeter. And so that's part of the reason I love wine so much, is that I feel like there are no set guides on what a wine has to be. And so going back to the perfect variety, I really don't think that there is one. There are ones that are more dynamic, that are more versatile, and that you can do more things with. Like Pinot Noir is a great example of that. And Chardonnay as well, because those tend to be like a blank canvas that you can kind of paint your style on. But otherwise, I mean, every variety has its amazing characteristic that I think shouldn't be overlooked. So it's hard to just point at one and say, that's perfect.
What is your opinion on wine critics and scores?
So that's always a double-edged sword right there, because, the wine critics, I feel, are a part of the gatekeeper to the consumers. Consumers look at them for a knowledgeable person. They find a wine writer who has a similar palate to them to give them guidance on new wines to try or wines that they should purchase, which is amazing. And I think that that is a reason we really do need wine critics and wine writers and scoring system. But at the same time, I feel like the scoring system has been up for debate, especially over the last few years. It's really hard, because if you're not getting above 90 points, no one cares, which, okay, fair enough. But at the same time, when you have an oversaturation of 99 and 100 point wines, it's kind of like, well, wait, I thought this was supposed to be special and iconic and something amazing. So I really appreciate the wine writers and the critics who, especially, I have similar palates and tastes with, and I appreciate everyone's opinion, but I'm not going to agree with all of them, which is totally fair, because in the world of wine, we don't have to agree with everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to make our own opinions.
Exactly.
Do our tasting. So on that, for opinions, what's your opinion? Red, white, or rosé?
Oh, that's really hard. So once again, I am a person that it's all mood and food based for the most part. My boyfriend just last night, we were playing Cards Against Humanity at home, and he's like, do you have a bottle of Pinot I can open? That's his go-to all the time. It's red wine. He'll drink Chardonnay if it's open, but he goes for red. For me, like I said, I'm all about bubbles. So if there are any bubbles whatsoever open, I will go for that. I am not biased on Blanc de Blanc, Blanc de Noir, whatever it is, right? But
well, my next question was still or sparkling, so I think I know the answer to that.
Yeah, right. Definitely sparkling. But let me put it this way: if I am home alone watching TV and I want a glass of something, I'm most likely going towards a Pinot Noir. If I'm having food, depending on what the meal is, it's either going to be I usually start with white wine, and then we'll go into a red wine, whether it be a richer Pinot or a dark red or a blend of some sort. And then rosé, I think, is one of those wines that is perfect for summer and spring, and especially for starting off, if you're going wine tasting or you're having lunch or something like that, rosé is great. But I definitely gravitate towards Pinot, which is pretty obvious considering I make so much of it.
So considering you gravitate towards Pinot and you make Chardonnay, and both very food-friendly wines, how do you approach food and wine pairing?
So growing up with my mother being first-generation American and being from Italian immigrants, food was always the center of the household, right? And the Italians, it's always pasta and tomato sauce, and it was a lot of very rich and complex dishes. So finding a wine that would pair with that is kind of what goes into the back of my mind when I'm making wine. So I always want something that has really beautiful acid, a nice mouthfeel, because I want the wine to pair with the food, but also something that can pair with multiple foods on the table. So when I'm looking at Chardonnay, for example, I want to keep the acid and the freshness while keeping a creamy mid-palate and texture in the mouth so that it can go with pasta, or it can go with fish, or it can even go with pork or things like that. Same with the Pinot. I want the Pinot to have some nice complexity, but have acid in the finish, because once again, it'll go with multiple dishes. And I'm definitely very... always keeping that kind of in the forefront of my mind when I'm making wine, because just growing up around so much food, and my dad would be like, oh, I want to drink this tonight, so I'm going to drink that. And it's like, this doesn't mix. Like, you can't have Pinot with everything, Dad. Like, we're having sea bass tonight. I mean, sure, like, if you really wanted to go there, we could pair it, but I know what kind of wine you like, so you probably shouldn't be drinking that with sea bass tonight. But once again, it's, you want the wine and the food to complement each other as an entire meal, not one being the standout of each other. They're, in my opinion, they're meant to go hand in hand.
And for those occasions when you drink a little too much wine, any remedies or secrets for hangover cures?
So my new thing that I've been going towards, actually, so I'm a bit of a workout junkie, and there's this drink called Fit Aid, and they have a recovery one, which has a lot of B vitamin, and it has some milk thistle and stuff like that in it. So I typically drink one of those. But the main thing for me is I just drink a lot of water, and maybe if I had a little too much fun, I'll pop one or two charcoal pills, and that tends to settle out the stomach acid for the morning.
Charcoal pills. Okay, that's a new one.
Yeah, it works really well at kind of settling your stomach and getting rid of that acid that can sometimes get you in the morning.
Especially if you've been drinking too much wine and all the acidity in wine.
Exactly.
What do you think a non-drinker loses out on by not tasting your wine?
I think it's... Do you mean non-drinker in the sense of they don't drink wine, or just someone who hasn't tried it yet?
Oh, I think it could go either way.
Okay, so as far as people who enjoy wine, I think part of it is, as consumers, we always try as much as we can to really pinpoint what we like. And I think that part of that experience is trying things that you haven't heard of before, not always gravitating to, the tried and true that you know of, because there might be something else out there that you like just as much or better. And I think that it's kind of one of those processes of elimination where you can go through something and try a full broad spectrum and really hone in on the things you like. As far as people who don't drink alcohol, I think that there is a misconception about wine, because so many people think, back in college, we drank Charles Shaw and Franzi, and it's like, yes, that's wine, but there are so many different types of wine, and wine to me is not as much a luxury product as it is a food product. And so even if you don't drink wine, you can still smell it and you can still enjoy it without actually drinking, if you want to stay away from alcohol for people who do. But there's this... It's partially, to me, like I said earlier, it's part of the meal. So I feel that you miss out on kind of that enhancement if you miss out on trying it. And especially if you have wines that pair so well with the food, you need to smell it at least, at the very bare minimum.
And what do you hope someone would get out of your wines?
So my winemaking philosophy has always been that I want people to open a bottle of wine and I want them to see the vineyard. I want them to try the vineyard, that AVA, that region, that site specific. I don't want them to have my winemaking style. Now, as a winemaker, of course, we always have a little signature that gets popped in there, but I never want a bottle of wine open and be like, oh, that was Erica's wine. That's just not my style. So when someone tries my wine, I really want them to feel like they can taste that Petaluma Gap wind that's in there with that acidity and that concentration on the Pinot, for example, or the Sonoma Mountain Chardonnay, and go, wow, the Chardonnay is so different because it's on a higher elevation and there's acid and minerality, and the flavor profile is completely different than what I'd expect from a Chardonnay. So I really want them to get out of the wine a sense of place and a sense of what different vineyards in different areas can really represent and produce.
If space aliens were to land on your property, what would be the wine that you'd want to present them with?
It would most likely be the Gap's Crown, either the Chardonnay or the Pinot, just because the Gap's Crown is such an amazing amazing vineyard. And myself and my mother have been very active with the Petaluma Gap AVA. My mother was actually the president at the time when the application was submitted and pushing the application through Treasury and TTB to get it signed off and turned into an actual AVA, which was 2.5 years in the making, and obviously years before that in the making, before the application was submitted.
And you're currently celebrating your 1-year anniversary as the now youngest AVA in existence in the U.S.
Yes, it's very exciting. Sonoma Coast is such a big AVA, so to really have a subset, and especially one that was a naturally occurring topography in the area, really made it special. And that's why I would give the Gap's crown, because it's just that wind creates such a richness, such a texture, such a concentration, while at the same time keeping the acidity and the minerality very present in the wines. So it's this really beautiful balance that is created purely by Mother Nature and what that site has to offer.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about vintage. Do you think that there are variations that are more dominant or similarities from year to year?
So definitely in the last 5 we can look at, and when you look at 2012, 13, and 14, we had 3 back-to-back absolutely amazing vintages that had pretty high yields, but as far as quality was concerned, all 3 across the board were amazing. And I sometimes feel like 13 gets forgotten because you had 12, which was a beautiful vintage, then 13 came around, and then 14 was a huge vintage and absolutely gorgeous as well. Then we got smacked with 15, and with the droughts we were down about 45% yields. So the concentration is absolutely insane in those wines, which is great for, if you're looking for someone who wants a really rich and layered and textured wine. Definitely not so much the delicate approach. Some winemakers obviously are able to do that still, but 15, we just had a meeting with Rushmore wine growers and a few other people, and just 15 is so different from our standard typical that it just is something that we're looking at as wow, it was a great vintage for the quality, but it just presented us something so different from what the last few had. Then we got 16, which was a really nice vintage. 17 was a nice vintage. And then all of a sudden this year we got smacked with 45% more yields than we were used to. And the quality is beautiful. The wines are not quite as concentrated, but they're still really rich and complex and textured. And kind of the joke that my parents and I have is that, you go to Burgundy and they have 2 great vintages out of every 10 years because of weather, hail, rain, whatever it is, or France in particular, especially Bordeaux with the hail. And you come to California and in Sonoma and Napa, it's so we have 9.5 good vintages out of every 10 years. So vintage to vintage, there's definitely a difference, but it's just, for me, it goes more into concentration and yield, not overall quality, because for the most part, quality is always above average to great to excellent.
Mm-hmm. And do you capture any signs or omens that will predict sort of the outcome of what harvest is going to give you?
So I thought I did, and then this year I was expecting, so I took over the entire Pinot parcel between the 2 brands for Trombetta and for Furthermore of my Sonoma Coast vineyard, and I was expecting, I'm okay, so last year I got, 9.5 tons. Obviously this year they'll be heavier in the way it looked on set, and I'm okay, 15 tons. Flavors are amazing. It looks great. The growing season was beautiful. Slap in the face the day it arrives and 22.5 tons show up on the truck. I'm thinking, I know what to expect. I've been walking the vineyard. I'm seeing this, and we might think we have things figured out, but Mother Nature likes to remind us that we don't know anything. So I tend to look at my omens as just the way the fruit is developing on the vine itself, because otherwise there's nothing that I can do or even think to do, because I'll be wrong.
Do you have any rituals that are annual for harvest that you do?
Well, aside from just trying not to die and to get some sleep, I would say my main rituals are, I wake up in the morning, I go walk the vineyards, so it's usually foggy, right at sunrise, and then I kind of have my map of where I'm going on certain days, then come back to the winery and do my thing. But it's really, for me, it's wake up, vineyards, go back to the winery, process fruit, then that night maybe go check some vineyards and then sleep on the winery property. And that's really just the only ritual I have. Other than that, right before harvest, I just try to, I get my new boots, I mink oil them, let them bake in the sun, try to prepare as much as I can, knowing that the war is about to start. But other than that, after about, the first or second week into harvest, everything just gets thrown out of the door and you're just trying to stay above. Just keep your head above water.
You walk your vineyards, as you were saying, every morning, and then also I'm sure you spend a lot of time in the cellar. Do you speak to your grapes? Do you speak to your wine? And at what point? And if so, what do you say to it?
So sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I would say it's more of a, just kind of thinking out loud, and as we all kind of have our little tics where we talk to inanimate objects thinking that they can hear us and respond. I actually have a kind of, it's kind of sad, but it's kind of a happy story also at the same time. In 2015, when we had left Crossbarn and Paul Hobbs and I was making the wine, 100% without Paul, I had my Sonoma Coast Vineyard Pinot came in and I was getting ready to heat up the tank and kick it off. So I'm doing a pump over, and I had gotten some pretty sad news about one of our dogs. And so I'm sitting on the tank and I'm just kind of upset. And that was the only wine that finished fermentation on a perfect, everything was perfect. Fermentation went off without a hitch. The yeast did everything they needed to do. It never got too hot. It never was too cold. It didn't lag. Nothing happened. It was just did everything it needed to do. And part of me is oh, the yeast heard me all upset and figured that they were going to be nice to me this year. And so, when I walk the vineyards, I kind of do a few things. Sometimes I like to listen to music as I'm walking, and I usually put my phone kind of in my chest pocket or in my vest. And also the same thing when I'm barreling down wine or pressing, I always listen to music, and I have different music for different things that I do. And typically in the mornings, as I'm just waking up and trying to get my brain to start functioning, I'll start listening to classical music, and same with when I'm barreling down. And then when we're processing fruit, we listen to more upbeat music to try to keep us awake and keep us moving. So I would say I'm more of a music person than I am a talker.
Well, that's good, because that'll come in handy in a few minutes. When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I've always had a huge love and admiration for animals. So I thought, maybe veterinary science. And I've ridden horses for over 20 years. And so when I was in high school, I started kind of dabbling in different areas. I never knew I wanted to go into wine, being that my parents, are home winemakers. My mom worked in the industry. Last thing you want to do as a kid is what your parents want you to do. So I shadowed my large animal vet for a day. And that was not going to happen. Between the needles, which I'm deathly terrified of, and different things, I was just I can't do this. I love animals and I would want to help, but I could never, put an animal down or things or shots, let alone, anything else. Then I also in high school was very active in speech and debate, and I was really good at it. And I went down to a competition down in Berkeley, and there was just this one time I'm sitting there and listening to, we had to argue over something really stupid and just to articulate our points and make sure that you could come up with an argument no matter how wrong it was, just that you could argue it. And it was in that moment that I was okay, so I don't want to be a lawyer. I thought I wanted to be a campaign manager. Couldn't be a campaign manager because I don't like a lot of politicians in general, and working with them every day did not sound like what I wanted to do. So it wasn't until my senior year of high school, I was spending time with Paul, and we were walking a vineyard one morning, and I started asking about harvest. The light bulb kind of went off. I was going down to Fresno for a horse show, so I stopped at the campus, then had a tour of the winery, met the winemaker there at the time, John Giannini, who absolutely amazing and great winemaker. And I was just all right, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do, and just never looked back after that.
Found that out young. That's good.
Yes.
What do you do in your free time?
So I'm still very active with horseback riding, and I work out a lot. So really my life kind of consists of gym, work, horses, go home, sometimes hang out with friends. As we get over 30, it's kind of like, I like to be home and watch my TV and then go to sleep and then wake up. And
I know you said you listen to a variety of music, but do you have a favorite group or singer that you listen to?
Oh, that's hard. There are a lot of them. I mean, once again, I'm a very fluid and mood person. So the few things that I've been really into, it's like for harvest when I was, walking vineyards, or even sometimes when I'm driving and I'm just trying to, get my brain working. I listen to the 50 most influential classic pieces. And then I really like, Carlos Santana was somebody who my dad listened to a lot as I was growing up. So I love Carlos Santana, especially his older stuff. I also love listening to ex-ambassadors, and it's kind of funny, Imagine Dragons, which I laugh as I say that because I went to elementary school with Ben McKee, who's the bass guitarist's sister. Yeah. So I've known Ben and the McKee family for a good portion of my life, and I'm like, oh yeah, I like listening to my friend's band who's super famous and popular. But overall, it's like I really appreciate the classics, and I also really appreciate classical music, and I also like my dirty, my little guilty pleasure of some of the new rap and hip hop every once in a while. So,
do you have a favorite film about wine?
Ooh, that one's a little hard. I actually just saw the Psalm 3 movie, and the Psalm movies have been great, and I actually really liked the second film. Mostly because Meredith May goes in the first beginning, she says, I've never been in an industry with so much bullshit. And I was like, that is amazing. I officially love this movie purely because of that. Otherwise, it's hard because you either have documentaries or you have people that romanticize the industry so much. And while it is a very romantic industry, people don't realize how much work we do, how dirty we get. It's blood, sweat, and tears here. It's very much like the food industry and like what chefs go through. It's like some days you're about to kill everybody, other days you're happy. Most of the time you're sleep deprived and you don't know what day it is. So, I would say overall the Psalm films would probably be my favorite actual wine industry movies that I feel are the most representative of what we do and what we go through. But other than that, I can tell you right now what my mom's is, because I've watched it 80 times, is A Good Year with Russell Crowe, which is a great movie. But once again, it's very romantic in the sense of this wine and this chateau that I just inherited. And it's like, oh God, if only that worked that way.
So for a really romantic evening, what is the wine you would order?
Ooh, all right. So the last amazing date night that my boyfriend and I had, we started with Iron Horse Wedding Cuvée sparkling wine, because it was my parents' wedding wine. So Wedding Cuvée is one of my favorite bubbles just because of that right there. And then we ended with some Hobbs To Kalon. So I mean, it really comes down to in my boyfriend's mind it would be the Gaps Crown Pinot. In my mind, it's usually a bottle of really nice bubbles and ending with a Bordeaux blend of some sort.
Bordeaux blend.
Yes.
A Pinot maker.
Well, it's one of those things, right? If you worked in a sushi restaurant all day, the last thing you want to do is go home and eat fish. So it's, when you're making Pinot and Chardonnay all day, there are times after harvest where I'm all about it. Yes, give me a glass of Chardonnay. Yes, give me a glass of Pinot. But especially right now, coming off of harvest, I'm like, give me something different, please. I need some variation from what I've been doing for the last 9 weeks.
What would you say the best piece of advice is that you've ever received?
There are really two pieces. One is when I went into the industry, I talked to numerous friends and family about just what their advice was. And Paul's words that kind of stuck with me was learn from the best so you can be the best, right? So you want to learn from amazing teachers who you can absorb all of their knowledge and everything that they want to tell you, and then kind of find your own path among all of that information. And the other one was Patrick Sullivan when I was working for him over at Rudd Estate in Oakville in 2011. The gist of it was just kind of you just have to outwork everybody else. just keep working, like put your head down and just work as hard as you can, and it will come to you. Like it'll eventually get there. And no matter what you do, if you're the hardest worker, then that's the most important piece.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any advice that you could offer our listeners today?
Well, I will tell you this for the people out there who are, just getting into wine, or someone who really enjoys wine. It's like, don't be afraid to try something different, no matter what it is. If it's, you're looking at a wine list and you go, why would I want to try Grenache from, Dry Creek or Russian River Valley? Or why would I want to try a Sauv Blanc from down in Paso? Like, just try it, because you never know. It might be absolutely mind-blowing. The other piece of advice that I have is wine is for everybody. It's not for just one set of people. It's not for only the luxurious, prestigious people in this world. This is meant to be, a food product, something that we all can enjoy. It's for everyone. So I think really my two biggest pieces of advice are try it. Try everything once. That's another piece of advice I got in my life. Just try everything once, when it comes to food and when it comes to wine, because then you can figure out what you like and what you don't like. Mm-hmm. And then you never have to revisit something if you know you don't like it, and you get to expand your horizons if it's something you never knew you were going to like.
What would you say your proudest achievement is to date in your work?
It's hard because I get asked this question a lot, and I also get asked where do you feel your career is going? And, I'm 30 years old. I'm a winemaker for 2 amazing wine brands. I obviously feel like I have a lot more to accomplish, but being younger, being someone who's sacrificed a lot so that I could get to where I am, I would say that probably my greatest accomplishments are being a winemaker for 2 brands and having my wine start to be recognized as a premium product and people really enjoy it. So hearing from people that they enjoy it, seeing critics write about it, that they really enjoy it, that to me is saying, hey, you're doing something right. This is all paying off. All those sleepless nights, killing yourself in college, killing yourself during all these harvests, traveling all over, like it's paying off. You're doing something right.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like
coming down Christmas morning and there's no presents.
Good one.
Yeah, right?
Now, let's just imagine that a famous person from any walk of life, living or dead, is photographed in a restaurant by the paparazzi. And on the table in the background is a bottle of your wine. Who would you want that person to be?
Ooh, that is a tough one, man, because there's so many different people out there who I look at and either I really enjoy them as comedians or actors or singers or whatever. I think it'd be really cool if Jennifer Lawrence tried my wine, though. I really like her. I think she's hilarious and she's a great actress. Otherwise, I would definitely not complain about Helen Mirren or, any of the greats. That'd be amazing. Sean Connery, I'll take it. Cary Grant would be my mother's choice.
Do you think that we'll still be drinking wine in 500 years or 1,000 years' time?
Considering that they have found wine from, 2000 BC and everything else, fermentation seems to be the one constant that everybody still enjoys, whether it be the style has changed and the way we make it has changed. But over the last thousands and hundreds of years, it's the one constant that we've kind of all had in our diet. So I really hope so. And I really think that in one way or another, fermentation will stay prevalent in our life, whether it's alcoholic fermentation or it's kombucha or whatever it is. I think that will stay as something because not only do people enjoy it, but also it's just something that, what was Benjamin Franklin's quote? The way God shows us he loves us is by fermentation or something like that. I can't remember the exact quote and I butchered it, but it's just that there's something about, whether it's wine or it's beer that people enjoy. It's kind of obviously it's a fun beverage, but it's a feel-good beverage that you can have one glass, you can have a whole bottle, whatever it is, there's something positive usually surrounding it.
If you were heading off to a deserted island, what are 3 bottles you'd take with you?
Well, let's see. I would definitely take, this is a hard one. I probably would take Roeder, Anderson Valley, Sparkling, they're Brut. I would probably take a bottle of my Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir, and I would probably take, the last one's going to be hard. Either a Hobbs Napa Valley Cab or a Chateauneuf de Pop. It'd be toss up between those two.
Maybe I'll allow you 4.
Okay, then I'll take all 4 of those.
And I keep hearing you talk about a lot of domestic sparkling wines. Would you say you're a big fan of domestic sparkling wine compared to champagne, or equal?
It's just hard because, I grew up in Forestville, so we were a stone's throw away from Iron Horse. So it's, and also for the price point, I mean, for $20 in Roder, Anderson Valley, their wine is amazing.
Yeah.
For the price, and obviously for the fact that you can drive to any store and get a bottle of Roder or Iron Horse or something like that that's domestic and that's going to be really good, and especially for the price point, there's the availability of it, and also champagne to me, I love champagne as well, but that is something that you tend to have to seek out a little bit more, especially being in the heart of Sonoma County, right? So you have a lot of domestic wine around you, but it's one of those things that I would say champagne is champagne. Champagne is amazing. You can't really hold a candle to champagne, but there are amazing producers here in the United States that are definitely giving it a run for its money, whether they're owned by, a French champagne brand or French champagne house like Roder, or they're a domestic on their own like Iron Horse. I feel that they both very equally deserve their dues.
What is one winemaking region in the world that you'd like to explore?
So I really want to, on my next France trip, when I fly into Paris, take the train to Champagne, because once again, as you can tell, very Champagne-centric. That's one place I have not been yet that I really want to explore. And then I want to take the train down to Bordeaux, because I've never been to Bordeaux proper. And I have, one of my best friends, who's like a little sister, is part of a large Bordeaux family. And I really want to go and visit some of her family's properties, because, it's like her uncle works for a little place called Chateau Yquem and Cheval Blanc, so it'd be really nice to go visit that. But I think those are the 2 regions I really want to explore. I've had some time to explore, Porto, and go outside of Milan and go to Tuscany and all of these amazing other regions in Burgundy. And I think that's probably Champagne and Bordeaux are the 2 that I haven't seen yet, that obviously you hear so much about that
are on the top of the list.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for joining us. But before we go, really quickly, our little fun game we play with Wine Soundtrack. And obviously part of the discussion is so much about music, and music does play a role in our lives, and there seems to be a correlation of wine and music. I'm going to name a few wines that you've been speaking about, and I want you to tell me what music you'd be listening to or what it makes you think of.
Okay.
So let's start with the Iron Horse Wedding Cuvée.
That to me is very much like classical music. Like I kind of think of the Hungarian dance, for example, and part of that kind of stems between that to me it's a very upbeat and very beautiful classical piece, and Iron Horse just has this like, the climaxes and everything that you get out of that wine. It's really nice, fluid, like very pretty, but at the same time very climatic, and it just has this like really nice flow to it.
Okay. What about the Paul Hobbs Napa Cab?
You see, that to me is more of like one of my Led Zeppelin songs. You're just like, yes, this is amazing, like rock out a little bit. I'm torn between like saying the Immigrant Song, because that's one of my songs that like gets me really fired up. When I was getting ready to do a little presentation for the Sonoma County Barrel Auction, I was listening to that song on repeat just because it just gets me all pumped up. I'll go with Led Zeppelin.
Okay. Chateauneuf de Pop.
Ooh, that one I would say is more like your kind of indie rock idea, like somewhere between really great old Incubus, or if you want to go more like new age indie rock, you could say The Killers or Imagine Dragons is what I would be listening to when I'm having that.
And a Gap's Crown Chardonnay.
Ooh, Gap's Crown Chardonnay is like a good Norah Jones song. Really soulful, but really pretty, and just like some beautiful weight to it, but also just really elegant and really like just like this romantic, classy, jazzy kind of song.
Okay, I'm going to do one more. Gap's Crown Pinot.
That one is more... Ooh. It's That's a great question. It's definitely a more substantial wine. So that one is almost like it's like a Michael Bublé song. There we go. I'm going to go with that. I have the Norah Jones and the Michael Bublé. Perfect.
I love it. Well, Erica, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you have a wonderful day and have a great afternoon.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.